Okay, so does your donation cost or count? It's quite interesting that I actually sat in the sessions earlier this afternoon listening about bulk waste and issues with regard to illegal dumping. I'm probably going to talk now about the same sort of thing, but from a charity or a charitable perspective, I guess, because, guys, you ain't got it on your own, let me tell you, okay? They all look a little bit familiar to everybody. This all comes from the op shops that I happen to run as part of Link Vision. Isn't it nice? Photos have been taken over a number of years, but as you can see, there's a considerable issue there as well. We've all seen it, haven't we? Anybody, put your hand up if you haven't seen it. There won't be anybody, I'm sure. Okay. I mean, it really is unsightly, isn't it? It's just horrible to look at. Just disgraceful. It's obviously unhealthy. One of those slides that I put up before actually had medical waste in it, which is really disappointing. Can be dangerous, obviously. Cost charities millions. We estimated about 3 years ago that around the country, nationally, charities were actually getting rid of about 60,000 tonnes per year, and obviously increasing. I think that we're probably going to do those numbers again in the next 6 months or so, and I would expect that there's a significant rise in that. So what does all that mean? Essentially, every dollar that's spent on getting rid of items that have been illegally dumped is a dollar that's not spent on a charity's mission, and that's the really disappointing thing, okay? All the charities under NACRO specifically, as well as my own, you're looking at charities like Lifeline, Salvos, Red Cross, Endeavour Foundation. We all have a charitable mission, the whole lot of us. And it's really important to note that every single dollar that is spent on getting rid of items illegally dumped is a dollar that's not spent on a charity's mission. And those missions, I mean, Patricia mentioned ours before. We look after people with low or no vision. But, you know, the important missions we're looking at: preventing suicide, assisting the homeless, providing a lifestyle assistance for disadvantaged people, looking after people with disabilities and all those sort of things. So, you know, it really is sad that so much of these items are being dumped on charities without thought. And just think about the cost, okay? We're looking at about $3 million a year for that 60,000 tonnes, and I think that's probably data that's just a little bit old now, and I suspect it's probably significantly more than that now. But just think about it: extra staff, extra equipment, extra trucks, extra PPE, additional tipping fees in those states where charities have to pay tipping fees, extra signage, there'd be fencing, surveillance equipment, CCTV, and in some instances charities are having to pay private surveillance people to actually have a look at their donation points. And clearly a loss of business as well. So there's a dollar to all of that, but also importantly, what about the social cost? How'd you like to be one of the people that has to sort that equipment or that waste? How'd you like to be in a sorting station? How'd you like to have to pick up those sort of items from a donation bin somewhere? Does it demoralise people? You bet it does. Does it frustrate people? Yep. Does it frustrate CEOs? Hands up. And clearly, one of the outcomes is that it just is apparent that the work of the charities is just not respected. There's obviously health and safety risks as well, and certainly environmental impacts, there's no doubt about that. Just want to have a talk about some of the current myths in terms of charities as well. And these sort of comments or these sort of feelings have actually come from people that we've interviewed over a number of years. Here's a good one. Charities get heaps of money from the government, so it doesn't matter if I dump on a charity because the government's paying for it anyway. Anybody in the room like to ask how much my charity gets from the government every year? Anybody want to ask? I'll tell you. That much. Not 1 cent. Okay. So it's a common myth though, and in many cases it's absolutely incorrect. Another one is that charities have lots of staff. that can, and volunteers who can repair donations that aren't acceptable, and they can also clean donations. Another question, anybody like to ask me? No. It's completely untrue, okay? Certainly all the charities that I deal with, they can't afford to pay people to do things like that, and certainly don't have the volunteers that are able to do that sort of work either. So there's another myth gone, okay? And another one. Some of the people that we've actually spoken to say, oh, well, it's inevitable that charities have to deal with donated rubbish. It's just part of the deal, okay? And it almost becomes an excuse to dump. Well, not on, all right? And it's something that needs to be fixed. Okay, so really what we're talking about is waste that can't be reused, recycled or sold. Okay, so it's stuff that will end up going to a landfill somewhere. Okay, and I'm glad to see, I'll give credit to the Department of Environment and Science in Queensland because Bianca's here. Thanks for coming. A few years ago there was a lot of research done where we actually went out and talked to people and asked them why they were dumping, okay, at many, many different sites. And that research was actually conducted by Uniting Care Community, which is essentially in Queensland is Lifeline, the Department of Queensland Environment and Science, NACRO and NACRO members, and also at that stage Brisbane City Council as well. The research was really in-depth, and we ended up with a report that was about that thick, okay, but it certainly explained a lot about why people were dumping. And the interesting thing is the research actually identified three main types of dumpers or donators. And they are the champion donors, the people that we love. They were about 40% of the people that were actually moving goods to our donation points. There were unintentional dumpers, that was about 50%. And then there were the deliberate dumpers. I think somebody said earlier today that the deliberate dumpers were around about 5%. We identified it as about 10%. But even though it's incredibly unsightly with the deliberate people, it's a very low percentage of the people that are actually dumping on charities. So the unintentional dumper, the well-meaning people, however, people that don't have sufficient knowledge about the correct way of dumping or donating. So what motivates people to dump on charities? The research once again showed that unintentional dumpers are motivated by a desire to help people through a donation, but clearly don't understand the correct method and what is acceptable and what isn't. Probably a little bit of a slight against the charities, I guess, because it's quite clear that there's a real communication issue there. They certainly also didn't understand what the implications were for illegal dumping. Interestingly enough also, when we spoke to people as part of the research, that most dumpers were absolutely dismayed to learn that their behaviour led to a cost on charities. Once again, I guess there's that communication gap. The real issue that we have in terms of that sort of donation or that donating behaviour with the unintentional dumpers is that it is very clear from all the research and talking to people that that big stick that we've spoken about just doesn't work. All right, all it's going to do is alienate that group, and they generally, it's quite clear, want to do the right thing. So the big stick's out. It's getting harder and harder as we go. So if we don't use the big stick, what are we going to do? Encourage and educate, not punish. All right, now I know it was interesting sitting on that panel yesterday and listening to people talking about the circular economy. I think I heard the word so many times throughout that afternoon, education, education, education. I am absolutely certain that's the right way to go. So in terms of the Queensland case, and please excuse me for talking about Queensland because that's where I come from, not too far away, it's only 4.5 hours to home. The biggest challenge is really an opportunity, I think, and that's how to affect the behaviour of the unintentional dumpers, because if we can affect that sort of behaviour, the 40% of acceptable goods becomes 90% theoretically, and then we've only got the last 10% to worry about. So that's the biggest opportunity. Biggest opportunity to have the biggest impact. How do we do that? Okay. Some time ago, the Department of Environment and Science and NACRO began speaking with Griffith University about the possibility of creating a social marketing campaign through a number of pilots and certainly through introduction in Queensland, but hopefully with a view to rolling it out nationally. The problem with that is, where does the money come from? And it was interesting listening to some of the councils. I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, but councils have money, folk. Charities don't. Okay, so I think we know a lot of things that need to happen, but it's a matter of how do we fund it. Okay, so what we've done through, or what we're doing through Griffith University is hopefully putting together a social marketing program to affect the illegal dumping, or to hopefully overcome a lot of the illegal dumping through funding from the Australian Research Council. Okay, so there's been a really large application put in through the ARC for significant funding, and we hope to hear about that over the next, hopefully by about August. In the meantime, however, the Department of Environment and Science in Queensland have actually put in quite a bit of money to kick off some pilot programs, and they're happening right now. So thanks again, Bianca. That's great. And I'd love to be able to say today, hey, the funding's just been approved, because we are getting so close. And in fact, it was only yesterday I got an update, and we've been through all the hoops and things are looking pretty good. We've answered all the questions in terms of the ARC and clarified a few minor points, but at this point we're not ready to push the button. Hopefully over the next few weeks. Okay, as I said, the Department of Environment and Science, it's actually quite interesting, have actually funded Griffith University, and Griffith University have also actually conducted some trials in Penrith and also Lismore. So we're really starting to get some traction now on what's important to people in terms of donating, and really what's important in terms of educating people about the cost of illegal dumping. Meanwhile, NACRO members are becoming active, and hopefully, here's a little bit of...
G'day, I'm Louise.
G'day, I'm Bernie.
G'day, I'm Steve, and we sort donations.
We love donations. If you donate to charity, then good on you.
Just one thing.
Please don't leave donations outside stores or charity bins.
They might get taken or wrecked by vandals or bad weather.
And then we can't use them.
Anything stained, damaged or broken, we have to throw them out, which does cost New South Wales charities millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, nothing stained, damaged or broken, please. Most charities can't fix your broken stuff or even wash clothes. A good trick is to ask yourself, would I give this to a mate? If you wouldn't give it to a mate, don't give it to us.
And if you're not sure, contact your local op shop to check. Yep, we can take that, no worries. No, you could probably throw that one in the bin.
Thank you for donating.
Thank you for your donations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep those donations coming in, just inside, not outside.
So whilst we're looking at maybe a national rollout somewhere down the track, certainly a number of charities and state governments are already doing things. That particular ad was made between the EPA and New South Wales and Salvo stores in Sydney. Steve, and Salvo's obviously a NACRO member. Steve is the treasurer of NACRO, and he tells us that nervously that's the first time he's been in front of a camera. Did pretty well, didn't he? And he said, well, it took all day. But anyway, we won't tell anybody about that. So I think the important thing is we're trying to be positive here. You know, it's not about killing people for doing the wrong thing. It's about encouraging people to do the right thing. And I think that's the most important thing. That's a really good example, and I think that's really quite a powerful comment, that one. Steve also added that he's not doing any more, okay? Now, the other thing that's happened in recent times too, I don't know whether anybody saw Sunday Sunrise a couple of months ago, but the CEO of NACRO, Omar Soka, who was meant to be here but couldn't make it in the end, actually did a session with Weekend Sunrise, and I might pay part of that as well.
Charity stores are being inundated with donations right now, with Australia's decluttering craze, which we spoke about yesterday, apparently behind a huge spike in unwanted goods being handed over or just dumped.
It's more than charities can actually handle, with nearly 60,000 tonnes being sent to landfill, which is of course not the aim of recycling. So today a new scheme is being launched to deal with the incredible volume of goods.
If it ain't fit for a mate, then don't donate.
It's a message that's repeated time and time again.
If you wouldn't give your pre-loved clothes, toys, furniture to a friend, then don't leave it at a charity bin.
Instead of accepting people's unwanted furniture and clothes, the donations are actually costing charities a whopping $13 million a year to get rid of the items they can't sell. Nearly 60,000 tonnes of it sent to landfill.
This summer, stores are reporting an even bigger influx of donations off the back of a decluttering craze sweeping Australia.
Hello, I'm Maria Kondo. 私のミッションは片付けによって世界をときめかせていくこと。
Vinny says it's seen a 35% increase in clothing since the Netflix show Tidying Up began.
Choose items that spark joy for you.
Spark joy. It's not as easy as I thought it was going to be.
We're on board. We want to change. I just want it to be strong enough to change me.
Now a group representing the charities have come up with a plan to stop the dumping and help solve the problem.
Well, I bet you didn't know there was a National Association of Charitable Recycling Organisations, and Omar Soka is the Chief Executive. He joins us this morning. Omar, we'll come to you in just a moment, but first to the St Vincent sorting store at Greystanes in Sydney, and that's where we find Vinny's New South Wales CEO Jack de Groot and also shop manager Leng Pang. Good morning to all of you. Jack,
morning.
Firstly to you, tell us about the impact of this decluttering craze. You covered this on Weekend Sunrise yesterday. What are you seeing more of coming into Vinny's?
Well, we're seeing a huge increase in the clothing that's been donated to us. Usually we've seen about 30,000 kilos of clothing donated to us on a weekly basis. We're seeing 50,000 kilos. So that 35% increase at this time of the year compared to previous years is something that's been a fantastic development for us, as long as it's good quality donations.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
If it's quality you give it to us.
You've got to be getting the right stuff. So let's make it really simple for everybody. Jack, what do you need at this time of the year, and what don't you want at this time of the year?
Well, what we do need is good quality clothing, good quality bric-a-brac, good quality furnishing. What we don't need is stuff that you wouldn't give to a family member, you wouldn't give to a friend. So if you would give it to someone close to you who you love and respect, give it to us. And if it's something that's given you joy, then give it to someone else who we can give a bit of joy to with the donation. What we don't need is stuff that you'd actually throw out in the rubbish. Charities are not dumping organisations. We have to spend funds, unfortunately, on landfill dumping when we've got rubbish given to us.
Sure, good
so
advice.
Make sure it's quality, make sure you check with the charity if you've got something you're not too sure, like electrical goods or some furnishings. But otherwise, if it's quality, give to us and we can gratefully put it to use.
Leng, we can see some of the goods donated behind you. Are people telling you that they've been inspired to declutter because of Marie Kondo's book and also the TV show?
Definitely, yeah, it has been mentioned several times, and there's a sense of urgency to it as well.
You've got to get that spark joy immediately.
You certainly do. Well, Omar, we'll bring you in if we can. Now, this has become a big problem for charities, as we can see and we're hearing about. What's the initiative that you're launching today to tackle this worsening problem?
OK, well, firstly, thanks for having me on. And the message from charities is always...
So he did come
thank
after
you.
all.
They are so grateful for the generosity of Australians, so please keep donating so that they can still keep doing their good works. The dumping, yes, it's a problem, and we've come up with a 3-point plan that's simple, effective and affordable. The first step is government investment in things like lighting and security cameras, which we know work, and also resources to stop what's known as broken window syndrome. People only dump, really, when there's dumping there already, so it's about site management and not getting it started. Step 2 is about recycling grants to help charities turn some of that waste into product. And a good example is Vinnie's in Coonamble. They've got a whole group of people who are literally hand-stitching old garments into new...
Okay. I think he's made the point. I'm starting to run out of time. I think the really critical part that that didn't come out was the fact that what we're now doing, and I know we talked about this in the circular economy thing yesterday, was that everybody in that room, and there were hundreds of people there yesterday, and we made the point that everybody in that room was doing something positive. So there's groups, there's individual charities, there's government groups, there are certainly state governments in some cases, but from our point of view, what's missing is federal government intervention, and that's certainly what we're encouraging now. And we're certainly throwing the challenge out to the feds to become involved and help us out to help overcome this issue, which is really big. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.